Welcome, Sanjoy, and welcome viewers and listeners. So, we're here today to talk about a new book by author and journalist, and those are only two of the many hats he wears, Sanjoy Hazarika. The book is his latest. It's called River Traveler Journeys on the Tsangpo-Brahmaputra from Tibet to the Bay of Bengal. And it is a mix of memoir and travelogue. Um, River Traveler tells the story of a great river, as powerful as it is mysterious. The Brahmaputra rises in Tibet, travels to three countries, and after traveling over 2,900 kilometers, goes into the Bay of Bengal. So, this river is the river that River Traveler talks about, and Sanjoyta travels on a variety of river vessels, including large ferries, small dugouts, rubber dinghies, and mid-sized country boats. He treks, cycles, flies in helicopters, is chased by pirates, and is driven in SUVs negotiating terrain ranging from floodplains to forested hills and the high Tibetan plateau. So this is a book which is written from travels spanning 2 decades, and it brings his journalist's eye for reportage and writer's fine sensibility to descriptions of places, people, and events. I will leave it to readers to read the book to find out more about it. So, and about me, I am also an author and journalist. My name is Samrat, and I'm also at one point written a book on the Brahmaputra, a travelogue called The Braided River, The Journey Along the Brahmaputra. And so without further ado, let's get into this conversation. So Sanjoyda went to one part of the river that unfortunately I didn't have the means to visit. So he was able to go upstream and visit Tibet and to see the Yarlung Tsangpo. And I wish I had been able to do that, but I'm very keen to hear Sanjoyda. I enjoyed reading the books and that. And, right in the beginning, I think traveling, of course, is always uh, full of adventures and misadventures, and especially, I suppose, in a place like Tibet. So you've written about uh, for getting an essential permit uh, as soon as you got to Tibet to start filming because you were there to film. And you went there, I believe, in 1998, not long after India had come back with its nuclear tests. So, can you tell us about that initial hiccup which sort of kicked off the journey?
Well, when we arrived in Tibet, it was an unexpected, shall we say, sight upon landing, because when we landed at the Gongar airport, you walked out of the airport of the aircraft to this amazing scenery, the river on one side and the great mountains around you and this flat. And then you see the flat of the airport is covered by water, and part of it is being used for drying millet and wheat. So you get out and then you walk to I walked to the immigration and so on. And then I thought I had all my papers, and I found the critical paper missing, which was the permit to film, because we had all this equipment coming in, and all the stuff for the film equipment was there, but the filming permit was missing. And I rummaged, and I had a nightmare about being turned back after landing in Tibet, the film not even beginning, as it were. But then the customs officer decided, the senior decided to make a little speech and said that we are great friends, India and Pakistan and China, and there have been some misunderstandings, so you have to pay a little fine and then you're through. So ultimately, it came down to that, and I found the paper at the bottom of the pile anyway,
Okay.
about a few hours later.
Right. So, so a bit of tension to begin with, but it ended well, or rather, it began well, actually. And
Yeah.
so then after that, so how much of Tibet did you travel?
We
You
traveled several hundred kilometers along the river, right up to near Bai. We could not go towards the source, which is near the Chemayung Glacier, which is near Mansarovar. But because it would have just taken too long, and you needed not just special permits, you need a special vehicle which carries oxygen and a special vehicle of fuel because there are no fuel depots on the way, at that time. Anyway, we weren't equipped for that. So we decided to take this other route, and which took us also to Shigatse and other places. Uh, and So yeah, it was all through the journey. It was quite challenging.
right.
Partly the physical, the endurance part of it. It was always at a height, and the other was the fact that you were in an amazing space which you'd only read about and heard about or seen on film, and to take it all in was also hugely challenging and exciting.
And did you get to the Great Bend?
No, because we were driving. We didn't have for that. You need another permission.
Okay.
So we had permission to go to Bai, but when we were driving to Bai, the driver stopped, and I have great respect for this particular driver. He stopped and he said, "Look, there was no road; it was all water."
Okay.
So he says, "I can take you to Bai, but I cannot. I'm not sure when you'll come back." So I said, "That's not a risk I can take." So
Uh,
Uh, yeah, but some dreams remain unfulfilled. Some may be unfulfilled through life, but I hope at some point I can see the great bend, the Namcha Barwa bend.
yeah, yeah. Which of course has been in the news uh, of late, um, for the reasons that China building that massive dam, the world's largest hydroelectric project. And of course, there's also the projects on the Indian side of the river, um, which are sort of the news points in a sense. I don't want to get too much into that because we're talking about the book, but perhaps because it is a matter of interest, and so I just wanted to sort of ask what you uh, feel essentially about um, the future of the river, which is, as far as we know, older than the Himalayas.
Well, as you said, the river is older than the Himalayas. It will endure long after we are gone. All of us are gone. Whoever's in power and out of power. The petty things of politics and governments and all these rivalries that we speak of. The river will endure. It will suffer because of the suffering that humans inflict on it and on the systems that it carries so generously and the people it nourishes so warmly. But the dams are being built, not just on the Chinese side, but also in the Indian side. And what these will do, nobody can predict because the weather and climate is unpredictable. The snow melt has started in a very substantive way, ice melt, and the issues all around the basin are shrouded in uncertainty, partly because we don't have enough data. The Chinese, I'm sure, are not telling us half of what they're doing or half of what is being done already. So the impact even on those tropical areas in the that whole valley, because there is a dense forest. There are, of course, extremely challenging gorges and so on. And on the wildlife, we have no idea of what the impact of all this is going to be. Apart from downstream, you can see that when a dam is built of that size, whatever the Chinese say, that it won't affect the flow of water. Of course, it will, because they will have to have some pondage at least. And when you build a dam, a hydro dam, the one of the first things that you two engineers insist on is the water has to be reasonably clean. Means it can't carry rocks and stones into the turbines. That will destroy the whole purpose of building a dam and generating power. So you have a clean river coming in, you have a cleaner river going out, which means all the good nutrients that are in it that enable life to live and flourish, fish, all the tiny creatures that make this world possible, apart from humans, feeding our fields and so on, all that will be damaged, perhaps not irretrievably, but deeply damaged. So when people either on either side talk about, oh, the water flow won't be affected, that's not the point. That is not the point. The point is you have damage to the river which is being caused and which will affect us downstream, both in India, Northeast India, and in Bangladesh.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's after all, it's a long journey. It's 3 countries, and you have, of course, written about all three. So the process itself, Sanjay, I mean, this book seems to have taken a while because you started with that film journey, which was in 1998, and the book is come out now, and that's a really long time. And so, what was the process? What's the process by which this book sort of came together?
Well, it's a big river,
Yeah.
and it's constantly, in a way, remaking itself. And we are reinventing it also in our mind's eye, in the imagination, in our physical contact with it and understanding of it. But to me, it's been in me within all my life, because as a child, I remember going with my parents and my elder brother to the banks of the river in Guwahati, which is not the monstrous city that it is today. But it was a kinder, simpler place. And standing by the banks and watching dolphins dance. I mean, I have never seen anything as beautiful as that. And that made a big impact on my mind, and of watching the great uh, steamships, as it were, cross the river, moving from one side to the other, one bank to the other. All these made an impact on me as a young person. But I traveled on it pretty extensively later on, and began to understand how people lived along it. But then the first thought I had about
When did you start writing? I mean, did you start writing a long time ago, or was it?
no, I started writing actually in about 2007 or 8. Sometime after, 6, 7, 8. 'Cause that's then. But then I lost my wife, and then I had a writing block. I didn't write anything for almost 2 years. So, and you know what it was like at that time. So, yeah, and then other things took over. I started a new Center for Northeast Studies in Jamia. I got involved with that. I was with CHRI. I was involved with that. And slowly writing bits and pieces, other books came out. But I couldn't get back into it until I started watching the films again and going through my old notes. People started prodding me. And then finally, I decided I needed to finish this, as much as I think it is.
Yeah.
So it was a difficult, challenging process, because it's a different book to anything I've written so far. Most of my books are politically driven, in the sense that it's about insurgency, migration, all these sort of issues. But this is, I've sort of laid myself partly out
Yeah,
there.
it's also a memoir.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's also a memoir. Did you know? There's this old thing about river journeys, and river journeys. For example, Siddharth had the book and the film. Herman Hesse is also partly a river journey. And so that sort of thing about a river journey, you also some kind of philosophical journey. And the river teaching us some life lessons as it were. So did this process of river journeys in the rural and the process of writing about it, that when one is writing about it, one has to also engage with it and reflect upon it. So did this whole process, uh, did it give you any insights or any life lessons?
Well, constantly, because if you're on the river, there are a few fundamental things that one learns. One is that you are completely at the mercy of the river, whether it's flowing low or it's in full power. You're not in charge. I mean, there's another entity out there. So we have to respect the fact that there is an entity out there which is much more powerful than we can even think about. The second thing, and that's related to the first, is how small we actually are in the scheme of things. So it's a good lesson in humility. The third thing is we are constantly in a process of discovery. I learn from, for instance, the master who drives the boat, that he can see from the color of the river how deep the water is or how shallow it is, where the current is flowing. And by looking at the sky and noticing the wind, he can tell you which direction he should take given the current. So there are many learnings from people around us who know our world better than we do, even though they may not have had the education that we've had. And I think there's a fourth thing, which is that we see ourselves far better when you put yourself out there in the open space. You're able to think clearer, you're able to express your thoughts better, and you're able to engage with people because everybody is equal on the river. You have, equal chance of going there or underneath or whatever it is. And I'm deeply privileged to travel on this all the way. I don't even swim.
Yeah,
So the
neither do I.
river gods
Yeah.
have been very kind to me. I don't know about you, but I know.
Yeah, I lived to tether the tail, as it were. So,
Yeah.
and so, speaking of all kinds of people that one meets on the river, and of course, in the book, there's also stories about people, all kinds of people who were on and along the river a long time ago. So, any characters that sort of made an impression? There are several in the book, but any that you'd like to sort of point out that maybe we should all learn a little more about any such character.
Well, there was this Prussian German soldier who came to seek his fortune in India and landed up in Gwalpara in
He's in
the
the book.
in the Roche, Daniel Roche, in the early part of in the later part of the 18th century, the 1760s, 70s, and he became one of the wealthiest persons in Assam because he was a major salt trader. And salt was the equivalent of gold or more because that was highly prized and very heavily traded. And both the East India Company as well as uh, Dutch, German, French adventurers and buccaneers and merchants were making their fortunes there in Assam.
Yeah.
They would trade in other things, ivory, gold, silk, etc. But this was one of the major commodities. And he got married there. He had children there. In fact, there's a tomb
Did he
to
marry a
his.
local?
No. He married a British woman,
Okay.
and she went away and settled back in England later. And his two young children are buried in Gwalbar, and that's how I discovered the tomb and all that. So I there are these people who nobody knows about, but he in fact led a challenge to the Ahom kingdom, saying that we haven't paid our bills, we're going to come and take over. But only the East India Company sort of intervened and said, you better not do such things. I'm just paraphrasing him. But there were other great adventurers and explorers and spies,
Yeah.
especially the British and the Tibetan,
Yeah.
in the Tibetan sector, with people like Kintup and the great nine, the Pandits, Nine
Yeah.
Singh and others,
Yeah. Yeah.
who walked hundreds of miles, hundreds of kilometers without proper gear in very tough conditions and mapped Tibet for the world, or
Yeah.
at least for the East India Company and the British government.
More sort of coming to more contemporary situations regarding Goalpara and Lower Assam. So, of course, there are a lot of river islands up and down the river, but the river islands in the lower course are often associated with sort of migration and questions regarding migration. Now, you've been writing about this for a very long time. And so I just wanted your sense, as it were, from so many years of research and writing and lived experience um, about this difficult question of, migration from Bangladesh into Assam. Um, would you say that there's a lot of it that has happened or that continues to happen after, say, 1947?
Well, obviously, there was a lot of migration after in the earlier part of the 20th century and the first decades after independence. Of course, there was up to 71. Post 71, there was some migration, but there is a general agreement on the 71 situation, which is being challenged, which is that the Assam Accord sought to place that in perpetuity, saying that anybody who came before 71 would be accepted, and post 71, they had to go through some procedures. But post 71, they would not be accepted and they should be detected, deported. Now, that's easier said than done, because after all these decades, after all these controversies, we still don't know how many code
And
Bangladeshis
after
there
the
are.
NRC.
And the NRC, that's even put a bigger murkiness, shall we say, into the picture. There are 1.9 million people who were off the list, but a majority of them happen to be Hindu, not Muslim. But that's not the issue. The issue is not whether it's not a religious issue. It's a question of nationality. Now, despite all these tortuous processes, so many detailed parallel procedures, we still not been able to deal with this issue. Now, there's a long-term way of thinking about migration. There's a short-term way of thinking of it. Most people are thinking of the short-term way, and it's not clear how that will go, because there are court rulings, there are government priorities, and then there is resistance to these ideas. But my view is nobody should be, pushed back without a fair hearing. No citizen must face the sting of discrimination and oppression, no matter what his faith is. And no person should be deprived of their liberty, let alone life without due process. That having been said, for the long term process, of course, you need, if there is better relations between India and Bangladesh, perhaps you'll get a time when you can have movement of people in a controlled way through the work permit regime that enables people to work and come back. This is what happens.
It's like Indians going to Dubai or whatever.
Sorry?
Like Indians going to the Middle East or something like that.
Yeah, whatever. But here you don't need a visa. Maybe you need a permit. The permit get back, and of course this is easier said than done because. But we now have the sophistication and capacity in software and surveillance to actually make sure this happens. But for that to happen, you need better relations between the countries, and also a better vision of where leaders want to take South Asia.
Yeah. Well, apart from the human beings who move up and down the river, because there are other life forms also, and one life form in particular which lives in the river, which you've written about in the book, and which I'm rather fond of, the river dolphins. And so, first of all, just tell us a little bit about where you sort of came across the river, which part of the river, where did you see them?
Well, the river dolphins are actually to be seen in many parts of the Brahmaputra. They're called the Gangetic river dolphin.
Yeah.
Although they are from the Ganges, they migrate along great stretches of the Brahmaputra. And I've seen them all across in Dhubri, even near Guwahati. Sometimes you see them even today.
Even now?
Even now. You see them certainly in the Dibrugarh area, Upper Assam, Tezpur, everywhere. You do see them.
Okay.
They're smaller, in terms of population, in terms of groups, than they used to be. But the numbers have slowly increased from...
How so?
Because I think there's better protection and I think there's better awareness, at least certainly on the mainstream. The main stem of the Brahmaputra. And I think there's better counting also. The other thing is that there are some places where the small populations of dolphins have got stuck because they're in a river that is a tributary of the Brahmaputra. This is one near Kulsi, near Guwahati. But there's a lot of sand mining which goes on, has been going on for decades. And there are new industries which have come up on the banks of the river. So that is, impacting their environment a great deal. And the pods, the populations are getting smaller. So that is something that people need to be aware about, and the pollution board needs to take a call on some of these things.
There has been talk. I think you also raised the issue of a dolphin sanctuary, but somehow that doesn't seem to have come about. So, would you be aware of what happened with that idea?
It's a good idea, I think. I mean, it's not just because I've thought about it, but it's a good idea. But it's difficult to implement because, unlike tigers, which have a range, the dolphin it's swimming in the river. It can go beyond the sanctuary. What happens if it goes beyond the sanctuary? Yeah. So you can declare very large parts because there might be dolphins in one part and not in another. So it's a bit tricky that. I think what we do need to do is continue to be tough on poaching and be also enable communities that were poachers have been poaching to find other livelihoods. That I talk about that in the book with one community,
Yeah, the bin.
the bins. We were able to develop a method by which they could use, fish gut, normal fish gut oil to use as fish bait and not the blubber or the oil of the dolphin. And that immediately increased, helped protect the dolphin.
Yeah, so I wonder, other life forms also. I keep sort of worrying that with the cutting off of the organic connections between wetland and river, that would probably be having sort of harmful impact on life forms in the river. And then there's also the turtles, which I think are suffering a lot. So
No. All life forms are suffering, whether it's the turtles. There's one, the gharials. Gharials virtually have vanished, almost extinct along the Brahmaputra. The dolphins, so many varieties of fish, because all these dams and all these things are coming up. The fish have roots in which they go, they travel. The spawn and so on. Suddenly, the spawning area is not there. What do you do? The dolphins also need spaces where they can breed, because they're like families, no? They're like humans. They have children, and then they help them grow, and then they need a free ranging area in which to live and forage and survive. So all the human interventions, including pollution, the use of fertilizers and pesticides in tea and along on farms, that leaches into the water, that impacts them, and they go far away. So all these are things that we have to understand.
Untreated waste going into the river. That's a sad thing. I believe that
It's horrible. It's not just sad. It's disastrous, and it's awful. It's just black. If you see in Guwahati, all the water streams have now become drains. And the color of the water, it can't be called water, is black.
And sewage treatment plants tend to get built, but they're not always operated. They're built more often than they're operated.
Yeah, Guwahati doesn't have a single
it doesn't yet have one, but even where they do have them, I think they have a general tendency to not run them all the time to save on costs. So, moving on, Sanjaya, to the last section of the river, which is the Bangladesh section. And of course, Bangladesh is looms large in the imagination of many Indians. And so you've traveled there over the years. And you've also met people there. In fact, one of the people that you talk about is even Assamese musician, Assamese origin musician, Mac.
Yeah, Mac now he's migrated from Bangladesh.
To?
He's gone to North America. He's gone to Canada.
Okay.
I think he's
okay. So tell us a little bit about your adventures in Bangladesh.
John, which kind?
Well, whatever comes to mind.
Very up to mind. But anyway,
you have mentioned pirates, so maybe a bit on pirates, right at the end of this.
Yeah, actually, I mean, Bangladesh is a land of rivers. You cannot imagine Bangladesh without rivers, because there are 52, or in the monsoon it becomes only 5,000 rivers which flood the land and take communication and transportation and food and people everywhere. Now, we were traveling for the last part of the film, and it is among the last parts of the book also, towards the Bay of Bengal. And so we did this shot of the singing of the bhatiali and all that on the boat, on the ship, a small vessel, and setting sun, beautiful, everything was wonderful, and cut. So everyone is very happy. And I looked around, I couldn't see land. And there was land an hour ago, now there's no land. So I asked the captain, I said, where are we? He said, you're in the Bay of Bengal. So I said, but we were there. He says, sir, your director said, cut the engine because it was making too much noise. So I cut the engine. The current of the Brahmaputra and the Padma takes us all this way. So I said, how long will it take us to get back? He says, a few hours. So I was getting worried because it's getting dark now and you don't want to be. The sea is huge and daunting. I mean, I'm not a very courageous person at the end of the day. I don't swim. Anyway, we kept chugging back. And then there was sudden commotion on the boat. And we were told, we were hustled below and told to take the equipment below deck. And I tried to find out what it was. And one of our assistants said, we're being chased by pirates. I said, are you out of your mind? I mean, pirates in this day and age, So I said, well, what happens if they catch up with us? And we could see three larger ships coming towards us. So he says, well, they usually board, they kill everybody on board, they loot it, and then they scuttle the ship. I said, fine. This is very wonderful to look forward to, I told Jahanu, I said, this is tomorrow's Times of India headline. One thing, one small paragraph, we will be. Anyway, but we managed to escape that trap set by the pirates. But for that, people should really read the book, How We Escaped.
Yes. So, so I think that's an excellent note on which to sort of round off the conversation. Buy the book and read it, and for more on the topics we spoke about and many that we did not speak about, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. And I've enjoyed this conversation, Sanjada. I hope you did too, and I hope our viewers will too. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Samrat.